Kazarin, крымский политический обозреватель. Пани Наталья Белицер, я прошу вас. И Валентина Самар здесь еще, крымский журналист тоже, я прошу вас присесть. Всем, кто нас смотрит сейчас онлайн и кто...
Those who watch us online, who follow us in the Facebook and Twitter, you can see the online broadcasting, which is broadcast by Chornomorska TV company. We're also waiting for Arsen Zhumadilov, head of the department to the president's envoy in the Crimean Tatars. Arsen, we're waiting for you. Ольга Духнич. Our country is a free country. If there is a simultaneous translator from Crimean Tatar, we can organize that. Not for today. But what we'll be talking about in the second part, I would like to introduce Olga Dugnic. In Crimea, she was known not as a journalist, but as a person who gives birth to the sense. In Kiev, she is not just giving birth to senses, but relays them to those people who read Новое Время publication. Arsen Zhumadilov, as I presented, the head of the aide department to the president's envoy in the Crimean Tatars. Natalia Belitsar, the expert of the Piliporlik Institute of Democracy. Valentyna Samar, Crimean journalist, author of the Question of National Security Program, and Taras Berezovets from Crimea. First of all, person from Crimea, political analyst, director of the project Free Crimea. Pavlo Kazarin, Crimean journalist. I will not say that you are Moscow journalist, but you now are in Kiev, you write about Crimea, you help people understand what's happening in Crimean Peninsula. I am Oleksandr Yankovskyi, general producer of the Chornomorska Black Sea Broadcasting Company, and I would like to say that our Chornomorska TV and radio company is probably the only systemic TV project which talks about what's happening on the occupied territory of Ukraine in occupied Crimea. And we do that every day because I believe that the Crimea as a topic is gradually forgotten by Ukraine. Now it's clear it's an anniversary of occupation of Crimea, but Ukraine is not living thinking that Crimea is Ukraine. We are trying to ruin this information blockade around Crimea. We work for both Ukrainians. We tell what's happening in Crimea, but we tell also to Crimean people about what's happening in Ukraine. We do it in simple words, and I hope that we manage we succeed in that. In the second panel, we'll be talking not about how that was happening, how Crimean Peninsula was occupied, about how long that was prepared. Even though the answer to the main question, whether it is realistic for Ukraine to get Crimea back, and it depends on answering the previous questions, how to get back the control over the part of its territory which was occupied by Russian Federation. We came to the conclusion that the beginning of occupation is basically the 23rd of February 2014. First of all, I would like to give the floor about what is the way of return of Crimea. That could be by force, via reintegration, It could be some other way. I do not know what way it is, but every one of you who's present here, I'm sure, has your own understanding of how Ukraine can return Crimea. Taras Berezovets, you're welcome. Thank you for organizing this panel. Sevgil is joining us. Sevgil Musaieva-Borovyk, who's also from Crimea. I believe we even finished one same school, but, well, nevertheless, Kerch is a big city. There were 180,000 in times of Soviet Union. Now there are less than 150,000 people. And once we're talking about reintegration of Crimea, Alexander, I believe we need to say that Ukraine needs to develop the legal mechanisms of return. What are the mechanisms of this return? This is the national strategy of reintegration of Crimea, which is to be passed by the National Security and Defense Council, approved by the President, and then passed as a law. Second, I believe, is what concerns the expanding the rights for IDPs and refugees from Crimea, the special status for them. We understand that the most pressure is exercised on representatives of Crimean Tatar people and representatives of small businesses. Out of 120,000 registered entrepreneurs, only 24,000 are left. According to the occupational legislation, the head of the Union of Entrepreneurs of Simferopol says that for many entrepreneurs in Crimea, it is a shock that the taxes for small businesses in Russia are 4 times higher than in Ukraine. And this data, these figures are better than any emotional signals. But my very good friend that I met in Moscow, Pavlo Kazarin, is quite skeptical in the issue on reintegration. He wrote recently, he said that just define who you are, decide on who you are, hawks or pigeons. And it is important to really decide whether we are acting, applying rough measures, we cut off the water, gas, and food product supplies to Crimea, or we act by methods of soft power. And then we need a different strategy which will be directed towards maintaining the loyal to Ukraine citizens in the peninsula. There are several thousand of them. The core of them are representatives of Crimean Tatars. At the moment of occupation, there were 30,000 of them, 330,000 of them now. 10,000 left. Some others say that more than 30,000 left. And besides them, these are representatives of Russians, most Crimeans, Ukrainians, and others. Crimea has always been the most multi-ethnic region of Ukraine. They always had more than 100 nationalities. There was not another such unique region in Ukraine. And based on whether this will be a soft power or hard hand, we will act according to that. The journalists say, when will Crimea come back? The Crimea will be back only in 2 cases, and these should coincide. First, in time, Vladimir Putin should physically stop being the president of the Russian Federation. He either should die, or something else should happen, and Ukraine should become an attractive state, a successful state, from the point of view of economic reforms and legal. We can say a lot that Crimea is Ukraine, but Crimean people have never felt themselves being part of Ukraine, at least majority of them. And we shouldn't believe that if this wasn't that, then something will change now. The brains of people are washed, and it is very difficult for people to accept new reality because they are not Ukraine any longer, but also many of them feel themselves like suspended in the air. Even local leaders of self-declared authorities recognize that is temporary situation. They do not invest into repairs of roads. Whatever they promise, they are not doing. The construction of this mythical Kerch bridge, they are planning now to build the tunnel, and maybe they will organize some catapult. But that is what people are joking about, even the citizens of Crimea. Talking about the time frame, Ukraine is to be ready to take Crimea back from the weakened hands of Russian Federation. When will this happen? According to optimistic scenario, not earlier than in 5 years. According to pessimistic scenario, this may take 15 years. The most important in this situation is to define the status of the peninsula and understand what it will be. All the laws are to be passed on the rights of indigenous people, and de facto the territory is occupied, and de jure it's still ours. We need to recognize these things. And another important thing, we need to promote the idea of our colleagues who say that people in Crimea should have the representation in the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. Once we are saying that this is part of Ukraine, we need 12 MPs in the parliament from Crimea. There should be a special laws passed and to have such elections, to get all the IDPs registered. Let them be 10,000 in Kiev, and 5 in Lviv, 15 in Kherson, and according to their registration, they should be registered according to the constituencies where they had to vote, to make the special commissions for Crimean people who want to go out of Crimea. Let them vote. Let 100%, 200 people, 100 people or 200 people vote for the MP. But Mr. Zvegilsky, who was elected by 800 voters of Donetsk Oblast, is that normal? Why he is a legitimate MP, and Crimean people have no one to address in the Verkhovna Rada? I believe that is unfair.
Taras Berezovets from Crimea, and we can ask Mustafa Jamilov and an MP from Crimea, and he's the only one, but there's also an interfaction group of Crimeans, so we're not the only ones. We're not alone. There is a group of people in the parliament in Ukraine that represents Crimea. Here's my question. Senator Musaieva-Borovyk, chair of the project of Ukrainian Pravda. In your opinion, how Ukrainian media, Ukrainian mass media, can do something for Crimea not to disappear from Ukrainian media space? For us not to think about Crimea in only when there is some celebration or some date or some holiday. That's a very good question. Thank you very much, because for a year I tell that somehow we should return Crimea to our information space or information dimension, but everything depends and on interest of readers, on clients, and news about what is happening in Crimea and how about the prices, how they are, or if it's about arrest of activists or some criminal processes or criminal trials or kidnapping of people. It cannot compete with news about that our troops are in the Balzo in Iran, and they started to take troops again, or it cannot be compared with Minsk news on the Minsk agreement. So the readers decide what is more important to them, what is a priority for them. That's why to speak about news, an issue of Crimea is not competitive. If there is no such a thing like the last story. And when there was an attack, a crash on Crimean Tatar channels, and all spoke about that. Also, there is a big problem there with information coming from Crimea, because as we know that people are afraid when they are on occupied territories, they are afraid to share problems they're facing. And journalists there, they are under the pressure, and that's why officially I cannot take an interview even, or to ask to tell them what really is happening out there, because they understand if they start telling about that they'll be under the threat of the only Crimean Tatars channel. And that's a huge problem. In my opinion, how we can move, how can we develop, and we'll do that, and we'll have a number of materials about Crimea and the story about special projects and how and what is changing in Crimea. We need to write about Crimean military who left the territory, where they are, what's happening to them. And yesterday, when Nastya Ringis came from Crimea, she will write how life is different now in a year. And she came very sad and disappointed. She cannot even speak to her parents normally. That's a huge problem. And that's what we can do. We need to compete with air quality content and analysis. Unfortunately, access to occupied territory for mass media, Ukrainian media, is a problem, because transport limitations is not that easy to get to Crimea. Not every journalist can, though. Anyone can go if they wish. What else? If to speak about in general about the country and the issue how to communicate with occupied territories, there should find an answer. There should be discussion. Like we had a big discussion about information ministry this week. They started to become active. They got registered. They have an official website, and I hope they will work not only for ATO but also for occupied territory in Crimea, because it's very important to build content which can give a hope to Crimeans who are loyal to Ukraine. Because I speak to people who are there from different groups, and of course they have information hunger. They don't understand that. They don't understand. They feel like the state is indifferent to them. I hope something will be done in that direction, because our authorities cannot pay attention to Crimea. They don't have time even for that, maybe. But we, even if they don't have such an opportunity, we must do it, because it's clear that Donbass, events in Donbass are more important, because there are victims and casualties, civilian casualties, and shelling. This should be resolved. And it's good if you don't have time for Crimea, okay, maybe let's unite somehow. Volunteer organizations, and during the last year after the occupation, there are a big number of them. But somehow they're different. They're not united. Maybe it makes sense in the administration of the president to bring them all together to develop a general strategy. And for them, at least they should share problems of IDPs, no job, no registration, no housing. What to do with the population which is there, what to do with those people who are under pressure by authorities there and under persecution, and the main question, how to return the Crimea. It seems to me that the truth or some plan can be created if we get together like now, and there are many other organizations and discussions. It can be 10, 12 hours. People, especially from Crimea, they are ready to find the time to develop a strategy and to decide what to do. Thank you, Musaieva-Borovyk, and she's editor of Ukrainian Pravda. I would like to give floor to Valentyna Samar. She's a journalist from Crimea. I agree that it's very difficult to sell Crimea, in a sense, to sell it to readers, because every day realities in Crimea are more and more different, and they have less correlation with Crimea. But before we can speak about information warfare, about counter propaganda, about informant, but we don't hear from the authorities what they from the government what they're going to do, how they're going to do it in Crimea, what they want to say. Valentyna Samar, chair of the Center of Vigilance Investigation. Here's the question: why? In a year after the occupation, we have not heard from our government how they're going to return Crimea. Because we ask very poor. So we will agree. If journalists ask the President and Prime Minister every day, the head of Security and Defense Council, and other top officials, these questions then daily in news and in top news, there would be a topic of Crimea. So we ask Paul, and it's our main profession to ask questions, and why we have not we were not able to move a Crimea topic, how to stop occupation, which policy to have, which method to use, all of that. All of that came down to that moment because of one reason. The authorities, the previous and this one, I mean, before temporary government, they are afraid of Crimea topic. And it seems to me that for something to be to be changed, we need three things which are free of charge to us as taxpayers. They will not cost anything to the government, and we know that they have empty budget. It will not influence on revenue rate. We need to do three authorities. They should stop. They should not be afraid of Crimean issues, and they should understand that sooner or later they have to solve this issue. That's why strong people, they will not run away flee from problems. They think how to solve problems. Second point, they should stop lying and stealing, robbing. As soon as we decide what to do with to occupy or to trade with them, to continue their business and to make on occupation, to earn on occupation, filling and also working for the budget, to fill in the budget and of occupation and Ukraine. There's a big hole for contraband because a lot of goods are coming from the mainland and not to Crimea but through Crimea, and that they violate all the sanctions on the laws. And the third one thing which costs nothing but it's very expensive for us, taxpayers, and to start to comply its decisions, starting with the decision of the Security and Defense Council decision. And the Cabinet of Ministers was supposed to build a central body of power to work with temporarily occupied territories, and we can add some regions of Luhansk and Donetsk regions, and that would be one place which would moderate the work of all power bodies, governmental bodies, and they would synthesize, aggregate, etc., all necessary steps, activities, and the authorities should do, because that is in the constitution and the laws. That's their direct responsibility and their function. That's why we hired them. And third thing we should do, I told, we should comply with the laws of Ukraine, and we should start talking to Crimea. Maybe this is the first point, because when all three components together in the head of a politician or a public servant, and when they start thinking about this, they will understand that it's not normal. There is no communication of the state with a part of its territory. When a year and a half ago we heard this, it was a ground for many sarcasm and the Moderator, like to hear the voice of Donbass. Now Crimea doesn't hear the voice of Kiev. Absolutely, the president can hardly says Crimea in Crimea. He mentioned that in the UN or in the US, and they take applause but not in Ukraine. And it's not normal. We can say a lot what the government should do, but I would like to say we should not wait. Like volunteers will not wait until Ministry of Defense reforms and starts providing, supplying everything from footwear to weaponry. We should take that responsibility of civil society in Kyiv and Kherson and in other regions, because a day before yesterday in Brussels we were told that now it's impossible. By the way, the European Union will also finance programs to build Russian language content, including for Ukraine and for Donbass and Crimea. This is very important for mass media that moved from Crimea to Donetsk, and they don't have a chance to work there. But we need to cooperate. We should not wait until they call us. So the administration of the president or the ministry will ask what we think. There are legal groups, advocacy groups, so they work wonderful. They think tanks, and I agree with Andrei Klemenko, one of the authors of the strategy of return to Crimea, that when the government didn't notice it, and that is quite a good concept. They should work with it. And as Andrei told, there is a Maidan of Foreign Affairs by every ministry. There should be Maidan of Justice or Maidan of the Ministry of Social Policy, etc., etc. We should be more decisive. We don't know whether the government needs Crimea, but we need it. We need those people who are there. They need it, and people who had to leave the peninsula. So we don't. Politicians will find their place. They will take flags from our legs, and they will carry it in front of the column. Valentyna Samar, head of the Center of Journalist Investigation.
That used to be Crimean project. Now it's Ukrainian project. Okay. It is very important when famous person in Rome was saying Carthage is to be ruined, and finally Carthage was to be ruined. I do not hear from our civil servants saying Crimea is Ukraine. If they finish each of their statements or presentations saying that Crimea is Ukraine, they will manage to convince him that not just us, but they will manage to convince the global community in that. Why I'm saying that? I would like to give the floor to Pavlo Kazarin and to hear his opinion on how Crimea, the conflict around Crimea, the Western Europe, for example, looks at this issue, how Ukraine can remind the whole Europe, the whole community that Crimea is Ukraine, that that was injustice, that the standing member of the UN Security Council by force took part of the territory from another UN member. How should Ukraine remind the whole global community that Crimea is Ukraine? I will be shorter if I may. This week, it's good to talk about Crimea. There are so many events taking place, and the way events taking place last year, but I'm surprised on how Ukrainian mass media decide that, okay, let us this week discuss Crimea, and then after the 16th of March they will say, okay, let's start discussing Donbass. But in Donbass every day people are killed. They discuss Donbass every day, but neither Merkel nor Holland nor Poroshenko mentioned Crimea. It is like Crimea somewhere in the periphery. but it is what it seems to us. But the situation is different. You understand what it is. The world in the second half of the 20th century witnessed many situations like that. That is when one country starts a manageable conflict on the territory of another, of another country. It's like in Serbia, where doing it on the territory of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Putin was Milosevic and Plotnitsky and others. They were like now, like then, the leaders of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Well, why I'm saying that? Donbass is not unique. The world community knows many examples of how to address the conflict similar to Donbass, but Crimea is absolutely unique because of one reason. After 1945, in the world, there was certain consensus that at the international map, new borders can be made, but you cannot delete the old ones. You can take part of the territory from the state, like it was with the Ossetia, with Transnistria, and so on. But in the world democratic community, it was agreed that you cannot delete old borders, but you can make new ones. When someone compares Crimea to Kosovo, that is wrong. Crimea was not, Kosovo was not joined to some other state, like Crimea was not annexed. Kosovo was not annexed. Crimea, in this sense, is absolutely unique because there are now cases like that, and the world doesn't know how to address these situations. After 1949, 45, there were just 5 annexations. The first one, Indonesia, occupied Western Timor. That was the Portugal colony, and the second case was when India annexed Goa from Portugal. Again, everyone closed their eyes to that. That was disintegration of colonial system. Then Israel annexed Holland Heights from Syria. Then there was another attempt, the fight for Falklands, when Argentina was trying to get islands back from Great Britain. Then 90 was attacked at Kuwait by Saddam Hussein. Kuwait was liberated and Saddam Hussein fell under sanctions. Crimea is unique because, unlike all the previous cases, that is the story about the 21st century, about Europe. And when it seems to us, and we can hear in Ukraine, that the main thing is the war should stop, and these people in Crimea, if they don't want to live them with us, let them live like they want. But maybe we wouldn't want to get Crimea back. But for the players who are in the role of the world gendarmes, it is the matter of principle for Crimea not to be part of Russia. Maybe it's not so important for them, for Crimea to be part of Ukraine. But if Crimea is part of Russia, stays as part of Russia, that means that many other territories can be annexed like Crimea. And maybe we will not want to get Crimea back. Whether people in Crimea want to get back to Ukraine or not, that is the story. Like, not a lot depends on the desire. Crimea is an architecture of the world security. Vladimir Putin buried Yalta system and put the monument to it in Yalta. But those people who think in categories of international law, they will not turn their faces away from Crimea. If Merkel does not talk about Crimea, if Hollande doesn't talk about Crimea, Obama doesn't talk about Crimea, that doesn't mean that this is not important for them. Crimea, maybe they will not find Crimea on a map, but it is important for them as a matter of principle. And we need to take it into consideration. We need just to look back at how the world is designed today. And in the center of any hurricane, there's so-called zero zone, where it's always quiet, and in the center of every tornado is always quietness. The wind can take the cars into the air, but in the zero zone, it's very quiet. So that is what the peninsula is now, because more or less everything is quiet there, but around it, there are all these geopolitical winds which take cars into the air. That is what I wanted to share with you. Thank you, Pavlo Kazarin, political analyst.
Despite that he is center of cyclone, and also there is also a very tough air, those who come from Crimea now. And since that's boxy air, Pavel, I thought that you would speak about that you change your opinion and there is Crimea on the agenda of the world, but thank you very much. It exists on the agenda of the world, but not on Ukrainian agenda. That's correct. Thank you. You're eloquent. Thank you. So, Pavel touched a very important issue, and that is about international experience. Experience of Croatia, Bosnia, Kosovo, the experience of solving those conflicts. Is it applicable for Crimea? Natalia Belas would like to give the floor, and I would like to hear the answer. Can we use that experience to solve the issue of Crimea? I would say that Pavel absolutely precisely pointed that, at least in Europe, a case of annexation of somebody's territory is unique, absolutely, and that's why any experience. By the way, Dayton agreements are not considered as a success story. Kosovo is an exception because of known reasons. That's why now we'll not get deeper in that. That's true. Annexation of somebody's territory, and in addition, in a difference to frozen conflicts and unrecognizable pseudo new state formations, de facto states has nothing to do with the case of Crimea. But here I would like to look at the last touch the last point from what Valentyna told. I would like to draw attention to that point. I absolutely agree with you that a standard, more or less a rhetorical question: why the state, the government hasn't done? And then two dots and the list of what the government didn't do, and it was supposed to do that. And we are not under the circumstances when we wait and from time to time remind to the government the experience of the last year showed that if we have some strong joint goal, and if we wanted to reach it, and first of all, we need to rely on our efforts to develop strategy and technical steps, and anything for Crimea and formation policy, etc. And to offer or even to impose it to the government, forcing to start a dialogue with those who have a product on that topic and not to sit and wait when somebody will bring it to us and then we'll criticize or accept it. What is necessary to improve efficiency of such a strategy? It was mentioned, but once again, there are a lot of strong analytical, a lot of good think tanks, NGOs, and advocacy groups with lots of experience and international experience. But in the context of Crimea, all of them are they work different, and each of them has great potential. They have their own partners, their executors, and their sponsors and their friends, and it seems like that is enough. Once again, under these conditions, it's not sufficient, and all separate projects and efforts and activities will have to be somehow coordinated. And how? But how? It depends not on sponsors, not on the state. Public bodies are responsible for directions of the state policy, but on us. That depends on us. As an example of a positive shift, I would like to give an example of a press conference on human rights in Crimea. First time it was not separate from the Crimea field mission on human rights, not Crimea Tatars advocacy group, but a strong group. That is Ukrainian Helsinki group on human rights. First time they spoke at the conferences, three of them, they made a report on their results and they developed a joint vision and they suggested later than that vision what should be done after. Low pressure, higher pressure on all human rights in Crimea. That is a cynical. That's a very, very strong card in the hands of Ukraine. How to use it? First of all, moving from such very broad, abstract generalizations, I would like to say the following. All of us, we have some strong partners, colleagues abroad in leading countries of the world, and they need concrete information when there is a lot of information which exists mostly and until now in Ukraine and Russian. A concrete proposal, a consortium of sponsors for a narrow, clear project. That should be a pool of translators who will keep a track, who will follow the most important events in Crimea, not only in the field of human rights and violation of all the freedoms, movement of the structures of the civic society, but the most important issues. And then we could decide which English language media, printed or some other, we have some contacts everywhere, which must be sent on a regular basis. And it's clear, it doesn't matter how genius the strategy of returning Crimea Ukraine develops, independently it will never be able to realize it. So the process of development of an efficient strategy all the time should be followed, accompanied with active activity on the international arena, and that not only professional journalists must be responsible for that and media experts, but or only government or only on legal organizations, and we can do that, and And as a concrete proposal, what in this sense should be done now? Here I have such a very interesting Crimean document, which is named a decree of the head of the Republic Crimea about a plan of opposition to ideology of terrorism. There were just it was mentioned in Ukrainian media, but if we read attentively this document, 17 pages, it means growth of threats for all political, social, active population and for those who stay in Crimea. And now we should and the only we should create alarm, and there was only one publication of Gali Koinash and a very good analysis on Kharkiv advocacy group. That's it. So I just want to inform you that according to this big document of this plan, all bodies of local self-governance and etc. through territory of Crimea should prepare monthly reports and what they did to fight ideology of terrorism. By the way, last pages, 3 pages, are statistic information about activities and the regional targeted programs to counter-fight terrorist ideology. You understand what it means in the context of the development of the situation in Crimea, and here we can make this program more important. And now there is a horrible situation with human rights in Crimea, and there is a threat which is much higher. I have these are my concrete proposals for all who can participate in this dialogue, and it should be done. And my last comment: here we heard that there is only 2 scenarios: a tough line and soft line. But it seems to me that this is a little bit, it's a simplification. In case of Crimea, it's not a choice either or. It seems to me we have to bring together and to development of a real policy, of a soft policy, of a soft appeal for those who stay in Crimea, who live there, who want to be citizens of Ukraine, who are loyal to Ukraine, but absolutely tough policy to former public servants of Crimea or leaders of law enforcement bodies, and to that big business and which was mentioned, which without borders functions there. So one element doesn't exclude one of these approaches, but they combine them. And finally, what we have to base all those who work on strategies and tactics of returning Crimea. In my opinion, first of all, results, representative, true public opinion polls. Without dynamics, it's very difficult to develop data. Many times it was mentioned here about the shortcomings of the poll or study in the framework of project of Taras Berezovets. Let me continue. And professional public pollsters, and not only I, as a former dissident, I can witness that a poll by phone in the context of real situation in Crimea, a priori it cannot be true a priori. Yes, there is no phone connection. I'm not an advocate. Taras, I can give you the floor, but we maybe will not continue this. I want to give you this very important information to you. Today, at the forum of civic initiatives in this hotel, Irina Bekeshkina, quite known to all of you, she's from Democratic Initiatives. She gave the last data of public opinion polls, including Donbass, Donetsk region, not only under the jurisdiction of Ukraine, but on occupied territories. It's because they have the real network of interviewers who, not by phone, but who know the methods, and they know the respondents, and they know how to do that. And quite interesting data she provided, and she confirms that, she states that that network of interviewers, she has it in Crimea also. So it means that there's a real chance to hope to get such public opinion studies, and that could serve as a reliable base for further steps and activities. Thank you for your attention.
Natalia Belitzer, thank you, the expert of the Piliporlik Institute for Democracy. Now, Pavlo Kazarin needs to leave, unfortunately. He says, Pavel said everything. We say goodbye to you, Pavel. And now, Taras, would you like to continue the discussion? Frankly speaking, if you just wanted to reply, because that was addressed to you. In fact, all the sociological surveys which were made by JFK, our best thing we did was our sociologically, that Churkin quoted it, but only everyone paid attention to one question, and there were more than 30 questions like that, and key questions, like Sevgil said, where's the question whether Crimeans wanted independent new Ukrainian media? It was about radio, TV, and websites that would be covering the topics of Crimea, and 60% said, yes, we want. And talking about what you mentioned, I can tell you that the ministry is working hard on developing mass media for Crimea. The money will be not from the budget, will help in that. The money will come from international donors, from Western governments, and these will be big projects which will be launched, and it will be about supporting of existing projects which are known and new projects. As to sociological surveys, I agree with you. I wanted very much to do this sociological survey by Bekeshkina. Lavrov will not quote it, but I don't want these interviewers to have this survey in detention facility. And with GFK, that was the case, because all the interviewers refused to conduct such sociological survey. And of course, it was impossible to do it over the phones of Russian mobile operators. I don't want this expert community, which is here in Ukraine, people who understand on the problems of Crimea. I don't want us to have some conflicts or arguments. There are not so many of us. When we say that 50,000 people from Crimea moved to Ukraine, to continental part, I believe that realistic figure is 2025, 30,000. But we are dealing with such an important thing They have invented even a new term. We're not forced displaced persons, but twice displaced. Well, the National Bank of Ukraine, but its resolution 629 made everyone non-resident. Myself, as a person who lives in Crimea, I could not change dollar. I understand now no one can exchange dollars. I have no dollars, but I cannot go to the bank. I cannot pay even anything because I'm non-resident. They cannot transfer money to me. No one can transfer money to my card or my account because I'm non-resident. I cannot buy a car and register it. I cannot buy an apartment because I'm non-resident. I mean, there's even no chance. Even if I had money, I cannot take loans, cannot take credits, I cannot send money, wire transfer money, neither abroad. No one can wire transfer money to me because I'm non-resident. And that was done not by Russian Federation, that was done by the state of Ukraine. This is not a minute of hatred. I'm trying to understand what is important here. People who are in Crimea who are pro-Ukrainian, they are ready to be patient. They say that, okay, if it is so difficult for the state, we understand that the state has so many problems besides us, but just explain why you do it. Don't do it worse for us. And when they say that 50,000 moved, these are like twice displaced people. These are people who come, get registered as if they are displaced people, and then they go back and live in Crimea so that they have the chance to use their banking account in Ukraine. And that is why we have these numbers. Another person I would like to ask question to Arsen Zhumadilov, head of the aide department to the president's envoy of the Crimean Tatars. Arsen, I would like to ask you a question. The institution of the president's envoy on the Crimean Tatars, did it help resolve the problems of Crimean Tatars in Ukraine? Did it make has it made this problem more known for Ukrainians, and how it affects the life of Crimean Tatars in Crimea, not just in Ukraine? I am for this. I understand I will be reacting as the state a little bit. You were saying that the state is doing nothing. I will tell what is happening in reality. First, we are dealing with the state, which has very little resources, financial and organizational. We understand what was the situation at the beginning of 2014. There was no state. The state is being built from the scratch. Especially when we are talking about Crimean direction, everything is so bad. There were two institutions set up which are interested in Crimea, Department on Sevastopol and the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, and the Secretariat of the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine, where 5 persons work. And the President's envoy on Crimean Tatars, and there's the aid department there where also 5 persons are working. When we're talking about the state which has to do something in relation to Crimea, we're talking about 10 persons. The state apparatus usually would have bigger resources, organizational, financial, media. We just don't have them. That is the picture as it is. Yes, on paper, there's this state service on Crimea and Sevastopol. It was set up in July. The competition for the vacancy of the head was announced but has never been held, and so this service hasn't started working, and it doesn't work because of the reasons we do not know. We do not understand what it is related to, but who has the resources? The society has, the civil society has the resources. We're talking about dozens of organizations which have media support. They have financial support. They have connections with donors. They have a good organizational resource. We're talking about hundreds of people who know what they're talking about when they are talking about Crimea. And it is nice that we are all here today, because that was a civil civic initiative that was the initiative supported by UN. And from these small steps in right directions, we can start saying something, doing something with Crimea. Now, what needs to be done? There's no strategy on Crimea. We do not need the strategy on Crimea when just 10 people are dealing with Crimea, because there will be no one who will be able to implement it. When we have the state service on Crimea, when it has all the resources to implement their mandate, then yes. It has been mentioned the strategy of return of Crimea, which was drafted by Maidan of Foreign Affairs. But you say why anyone took it. There's no center of decision making in this relation in the state. So what we are doing, there is this aide department, and our tactic is to make small steps in correct direction. There was initiated and supported by many experts, many agencies, the draft law on indigenous people of Ukraine, which will regulate the status of Crimean Tatar people. Next to me, Natalia Belitzer she's a known expert, and I would like to thank her for participating in development of this draft. Majlis of Crimean Tatar people and Mr. Rifat Chubarov initiated drafting of the new constitution of Autonomous Republic of Crimea. Why do we need it? It will not work today, but that is our instruction, that when Crimea is back, will start immediately working. Crimea will be back to Ukraine. We will not have time to think about what to do with it. And if we do not decide it in advance, then there will be no one to extinguish the fire, so to say, because we'll have all these problems, Buranovsky, Babushki, and Russian peace, world, and so on. We need to prepare the instruction, what we believe the new Crimea should be. And our leadership, the President of Ukraine, talk about Crimea not just in the days on some days. On the 23rd of February, Poroshenko was talking about Crimea when Chibijahan was shot. It was the day 100 of years ago, the leader of Crimean Tatars was shot dead. And I would like to thank the civil society that initiated that address, and we, as the aid department of Mr. Zhumadilov, we also joined that to make the message correct, because people in Crimea hear that. And postscriptum, don't touch upon the mechanism of self-implemented prophecy or forecast, but sometimes our people in Crimea, they get disappointed in us and they turn away from us, and we wouldn't like this to happen. Arsen Zhumadilov, head of the department, to the president's envoy on the Crimean Tatars, Olga Dukhnich, the journalist. I would like to ask you the question, how to talk to people in Crimea to preserve the loyalty of those people who are loyal to Ukraine, not to lose the people in Crimea who are far away from politics. And there are many people in Crimea who say, okay, which flag is there doesn't matter. The main thing is that there are no shootings anywhere. First of all, this is a big fundamental problem of Crimea, and this is the process of social comparison. Crimea has always been insulated from other parts of Ukraine. If between the oblasts of Ukraine there are some communication flows, you can go somewhere, understand what's happening. Crimea was the final point of communication. There was always their own policy, and that was always a complicated issue. And people from Crimea, because they have such a high respect to themselves, it was very difficult for them to see what's happening on the continental part of Ukraine. And the problem was when a person could go somewhere. If you look at the statistical information, how many people from Crimea visited other countries, we have problems because we know that it is next to impossible to get to Crimea. People have problems with crossing this control point in Chengar, and even those people who stay in Crimea, even those people who are loyal to Ukraine, who are apolitical and unneutral, well, now the information policy of Russia is based on that. They say, okay, look at Ukraine, and the war is going on, and you have no war here. Be happy. And this is wrong when we violate the possibility for people to see anything else outside their region. And there are two tasks to be addressed. First, and I see it not just myself, but looking at the experience of Georgia that has been living for 25 years with these problems. What's happening?
которые живут на свободных территориях.
Those people who live on liberated territories, they forget that there are people somewhere who are also part of our state, and I understand. I listen to all my colleagues. It's difficult to sell Crimea, but why not do it via culture? There should be some projects which will tell about what Crimea is. Akhtem Sitablayev makes a Khaytarma film about Crimean Tatar people, the cultural projects which could support the topic of Crimea so that people do not forget about Crimea on the territory of Ukraine. We also can work on that, what is Crimea. When I would come to Kiev 2 years ago, people would ask me, are these Crimean Tatars still killing you? Again, supporting people who arrived to continental part of Ukraine, the process of adaptation. To get adapted to the life on the continental part, people should forget about what was happening to them in Crimea. There should be different policy in relation to people who moved away, but they should remember that Crimea is still there. The same should be done in relation to occupied territories. Nothing could be done, I mean, talking about political project or legal project, but we need to provide information to preserve the chance for people. Many people who live in Georgia, in Abkhazia, they understand that it's easier to get medical aid in Georgia than in Russia. Ukraine should create the mechanisms, and the person always go where it's easier to address everyday needs. Ukraine should create the mechanisms thanks to which it will be easier for people from Crimea to resolve their problems. The sanctions which are there, maybe new can be imposed, which will make impossible to resolve some issues on the territory of Crimea, but will make it easier for people from Crimea to resolve it on the continental part of Ukraine.
Thank you, Olga. Olga, she's a journalist. We have about 15 minutes. If our audience has questions, please ask your questions. I would like to ask Natalia Benitez to comment. You told that there is not enough materials about Crimea in advocacy materials in abroad and also in English. I was abroad and I wanted to give them the report. All experts have them. Such reports of civic groups, and they have from what they really need, what can be done, and what we can discuss in New York, Geneva, and Strasbourg. That there is not enough of competent international mission respected that could be trusted. UN mission on human rights, which observed events in Ukraine, also from Russian authorities that they should provide access to Crimea. Why? Because our materials, if we translate them to English, less trust. They have less of trust, and they need to collect facts. Not just the world should have access, and so there should be international monitoring organizations. It's pity one person left, but I was in Kosovo. I know about background. Examples are not good for Crimea because Crimean Tatars are showed that despite with political Ukrainians, different religion, different ethnic origins of people, but it's not a key in the conflict like in Bosnia and Serbia and Kosovo. Thank you. So the question, you heard that there will be some content for Crimea produced by European EU. What do you mean? That one which would in Ukrainian channels like Euronews, or how they will reach a Crimean audience? Could you tell us? I told that we discussed the issue, and probably you heard about the statement of Mogherini that there will be content for Russian-speaking audience in Baltic countries, Moldova, etc. And please understand, we're all Russian. We are three language speakers, and our children speak 5 languages. So it's about not of prevalent on one country production of such content, because people don't have a choice now in Baltic countries or in other countries of former USSR, because the content is produced and transmitted. It's not mass media, that is just mass propaganda. But now they study this issue, and there are the experts where to be produced. Who, I cannot answer your question. So it's on the level of discussion, but I believe that we should also say that such content is produced here. When I told that we don't need wait for someone to do it, we should go and go. We went to Oleksandr and we brought a Chornomorska TV radio company. Now there are two satellites. They are working for Crimea, but also for Europe and for America. And that content goes in Russian. In 2 months we did what I don't know how long the government would try would. So on 3-4 grounds, so they broadcast, transmit that content and online and also through cable networks. More questions, please. Okay, if there is no question, then we will summarize our discussion. My opinion, how to return Crimea. In Russian Federation, they say, okay, we'll hold some referendum, an honest referendum, and that will decide what to do with Crimea. This is a very interesting moment. I would like to say the following to such people. Again, got your car, your house, your wallet, and they say, because of the court, the court decision, we cannot return all of this. Again, we should hold the referendum and to decide. And if we disagree, sorry, it's democracy, it's the referendum, and we'll not return it. So Crimea should be returned to Ukraine without any referendums, without any condition, unconditional. I believe no unconditional, no referendums for a return of Crimea, like it was taken without any referendum, because what was happening in March is not a referendum. And we will not say that there was a referendum because there was no referendum in March 2014, and also without Russian Federation, without referendum, should look for the ways how to return Crimea back to Ukraine. Now I'd like to give the floor to each of you. If you want to say something important you wanted to say to Crimeans or to Ukrainians interested in Crimean issues, Sevgil. Taras Berezovets. I never. Someone who doesn't have a goal, he doesn't know where to move and fails. Let's be realistic. New Ukraine doesn't know what it wants, except it wants to live like in EU and to be defended like all the rest of NATO countries. But people think little about duties and taxes and limitations, restrictions countries have who are members of NATO for decades. So in Europe, it's impossible when someone makes money and receive them in envelopes, because when they send unpaid taxes, and this money which didn't went into defense budget, and this budget doesn't go to salary of police, and if public servants are paid poorly, there is a guarantee for corruption. The same about Crimea. If we don't know where we move, if we don't know objectives, we cannot run away from the topic of its return. So the strategy is necessary. Just to understand which we need public institutions to build. It's thank God we have Mr. Zhumadilov, is like a Don Quixote who is fighting alone, but he's the only one. He's not enough. He needs assistance. Let us. Arsen has said great words. Civic society doesn't need civic budgets or anything. There are enough on us for that process to move. Thank you, Valentyna.
I absolutely agree with Taras that he didn't say that's the first, but I believe the first thing to happen is to answer questions. What was the main reason that allowed to do it so easily in Crimea? Political corruption. Unless there were all those people who could be used in this scenario, nothing would have happened. And unfortunately, because of that, No conclusions have been made out of that, and the political corruption leads to business corruption, and it still hampers us from living in a different country, the country that we have already gained the right to live in. We need to stop using the topic of Crimea to enrich yourself, enrich your group, and as soon as we stop that, then I believe it will be much easier to resolve that problem. Thank you. Natalia Belitzer. Thank you. I want to address the numerous friends, colleagues from Crimea who believe that we forgot about them, that we do not pay much attention. Dear, we have not forgotten. We love you, we remember, and we promise all together to do everything possible to support you somehow, to help you, especially in all these things with the crossing of administrative border. Let us all together jointly organize better future for Crimea. Let us do it as the whole of Ukraine. I would like to support Natalia Belitzer and continue the address to our compatriots in Crimea. We hope this will not last long. The invasion that you are dealing with will soon finish. There's no alternative to that. That's the only way, because the whole world is on the side of Ukraine. 99% of all of us have never had anything to do with the occupation. We will once meet in a free new Ukraine. Crimea is Ukraine. Olga Dukhnich. I also would like, and I join my colleagues saying I want Crimea to be back to Ukraine soon, but only I don't believe that this process will be quick and easy. I believe that we, like many countries which survive through such situations, have to get ready to a lengthy process, to a long game, and we need to try the topic of Crimea to become the topic for the whole country, but not just for people who moved from the territory of Ukraine, but those people who moved from Crimea to continental Ukraine. They can make this agenda so interesting that it's not just about the news about how bad it is in Crimea, but that Crimea is an interesting region, and that for any continent, island, or peninsula is so interesting, especially Crimea, which has such an interesting culture. Sevgil. In conclusion, to what my colleague said, I believe it is very important, and that is what we haven't mentioned. We addressed Crimean people, but I would like to address Ukrainians, the citizens of our country. I believe much depends on their desire to get Crimea back. It depends on every person who lives there. And in principle, if there is an interest, because I see it less and less, I feel it less and less. People have so many problems, devaluation of hryvnia, Donbass, and Crimea is not on the agenda. But I want to say, it started from Crimea. All this difficult year for the country started with Crimea, and I am sure that the key for resolving all the problems in the country is in Crimea. I am convinced that it started with Crimea, and it will end up with Crimea, and the sooner the better. And one more. I believe that many will not understand, but still I believe that if you find time, money, and desire to have some rest this year, to go for holidays, I would like to invite you to Crimea, to go to Crimea, to talk to people. That is what they lack. You need to answer their questions, to ask how they live. Those threads which were broken are to be restored. The threads of normal human communication. That's what they're looking for. For who it is safe, especially young people. We have 3 minutes left. Addressing Ukrainians, I didn't want to say that, but my people I know, who I know in Kiev, they believe that there are traitors in Crimea. I address the whole population. This is not so. Be able to forgive even those people who were brainwashed and who committed mistakes. And like Valentyna said, that is very important what she said. Thank you. We'll complete our discussion. You could watch it online on in Chornomorska Broadcasting Company. I believe we are doing very important thing. I say that we are doing very important thing when we tell to Ukrainians about what's happening in Crimea. If you are not a citizen, if you do not participate in the civil life of your country, then they take away your rights, your freedoms. People you know or relatives could be put to prison, and you will be left without any means. Thank you. Thank you all who watched us online on Chornomorska Broadcasting Company, and thank to the participants of this panel. I hope that we attracted the attention to Crimea of all our big country, Ukraine. Crimea is Ukraine.
Саша.